All right, good morning. Those of you that have joined us for the Inspecting Stucco during home inspection class. I have Jeff Adams with me today to be presenting this to you. So everyone's been invited to this, and we've got about 250 people registered for the class.
And for all InterNACHI members, including those track inspectors, I'm asking that you go into your InterNACHI dashboard and you can manually add the 2 hours of CEs. So you get the CEs both for track, if you're a track inspector, and then for track inspectors and InterNACHI inspectors, you will receive the 2 hours for your InterNACHI credit.
Anyway, without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Jeff Adams out of San Antonio, Texas. Jeff has done a lot of stucco inspections and litigation on stucco issues with builders and on homes, and represent a lot of homeowners on these things. So I know this, without a doubt, this is going to be an excellent class. So I will turn it over to Jeff. Jeff, good morning.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. I want to kind of kick this off a little bit and make sure that we described it straight up front that when you're dealing with the with stucco and the ASTM standards and so forth, it does not change regionally. Sometimes I hear people say, well, we do it differently here, we do it differently there. The ASTM standards are a blanket for all across the country. It doesn't matter. There's no changes if you are in Minnesota or in Texas. Okay, it does not change as to the guidelines for stucco. So always remember that. So as I'm talking about these ASTM standards and so forth, it doesn't matter where you're at in the country, it's still going to be the same standards without any real deviation off of it. You can kind of see with the opening slide here, we're going to discuss a lot of these standards. We will discuss a little bit on how I choose to report it and so forth. Here lately, there's been several people posting about doing destructive testing on stucco. I would never recommend doing any type of destructive testing as a home inspection. The only destructive testing I ever do is for litigation, and I bring in someone else to make the cuts. I'm not getting out there cutting stucco, peeling it back. I'm there to observe it and so forth. I would never recommend that you start drilling holes or cutting out stucco as any part of a home inspection. That's only strictly for litigation type of aspects. Okay, so please remember that. Don't start drilling holes through people's stucco, moisture barriers for these relocation companies or anything else. You're just asking for creating problems and damage and what have you. So with that said, we're going to kind of get started here on everything. Well, I say that, there we go. There's 4 types of main stucco that you mainly see, and we're really just going to talk about the hard coat or a modified stucco, not too much with EIFS. It runs across the board. For all my Houston people, this is not including what I like to call the LP crap, which is recycled paper with a top coat of stucco finish over some type of tape, such as a zip or what have you. They've had a lot of problems with this. They're back to buying their trim from James Hardie again. Keep that in mind. If it was such a great product, they would be using their own trim and not James Hardie's trim. We can talk about that, and I can answer any questions because you're seeing it a lot, but that's not really what's going to be included in these slides. We're going to be sticking mostly with the hard coat stucco and a modified stucco. A lot of different variations, but you might see a modified stucco as a single coat, then with a polymer top coat and what have you. And there's a lot of different ways of doing it. Not all of them are meet the criteria of the code or the standards for ASTM. Okay, the stucco as a home inspector truly is a liability the way most people do home inspections. But if you learn how to look at stucco, and I know some people that don't even want to do stucco houses and they shy away from them, and that's fine too. If your business allows for that, not a problem. But when you really learn what to look for and the standards, stucco is not as big of a liability as it is when you don't know what you're looking at. There's some pictures I'm going to show you all here in a little bit. That's an actual litigation case where we cut it open. No home inspector would have really known what to look for on that and would have been bit. The lady cleaned it up every time her room was across the house, but every time it rained, she said she could hear the water droplets coming through around one of the windows. And so she stayed up all night cleaning it. There was absolutely no water stains and no swollen wood. I knew it was a problem when I got to the outside. Most home inspectors would not have noticed that. I've seen too many reports with photos where the home inspector actually did not catch the staining on the outside. That was an indication that that wall would have been rotted out. So once you learn what to look for, it's really not that difficult, and it's very easy to do an inspection and report on it. With that said, we're going to be the things to look for. We're going to jump into obviously is a drainage system, and that's a lot of different things from your flashings, your soffit or your boxed details, your weep screed, which I refer to as a flashing because it does call it to have a 3.5-inch flashing detail. So that's always important, and that's how, instead of just leaving it as a weep screed when I report on it, I call it a weep screed flashing. And then unlike some other products, stucco has to have some type of flashing above doors and windows. It specifies non-corrosive, so that's typically going to be a metal flashing, but they do make some plastic PVC flashing details that you can buy also. But it is required, and you don't want to confuse that with the AMA 2400 standards. So you flash your windows per AMA 2400, or you may pan flash your doors per ASTM standards for doors. But what we're talking about is flashing stucco, and we'll talk about that. It is required to have a flashing detail, no ifs, buts, and ands about it for the stucco. Means to expand and contract. I use it as a generic term, expansion joints, but there is a couple of different details with that. One's a control joint, one's an expansion joint. I use a generic term because both of them do the same thing. One works better for expansion and contraction, but both of them still expand and contract. Bond breaks at dissimilar materials, those are always missing. And then proper sealants. One shot caulk is not a proper sealant to be used on anything. I tell people if it says it's got a 30-year warranty, that means it's good for 30 days, and that's about it. It needs to have good sealants, and you also have to be very careful. I'm real careful not to prescribe sealants and that could cause problems to the windows. So it always has to go back to the window manufacturer. Outside of that, I like a good urethane, like an NP1 type of product or what have you. There's some good butyl rubber sealants, but you do have to make sure that they comply with the window company. So before you tell someone to go out there with some type of hot sealant and caulk around the windows, be very careful with that because some of those sealants will damage these final windows. Elastomeric paints, they do not replace construction requirements. I can't tell you, it's probably every week, every other week, I hear somebody claiming, whether it's a home inspector or an engineer or something, to paint over bad stucco. Those elastomeric paints do not have any type of perm rating. I've gone to numerous houses, big water balloon sticking out of there. You can just poke it with a pocket knife and the water comes pouring out of the wall. The paint's maybe dry in the wall, but the paint's all stretched. You can see where it's had water in it. I've done houses where the people were convinced to paint one wall of the house with elastomeric, and you talk about rotting it out. It just creates all kinds of problems. I am not a fan of elastomeric. I'd rather have like a polymer type of top coat, whether it's Dryvit or some name brand product. It will help resist water, but it also breathes and has a perm rating. Elastomeric paint just causes a ton of problems, and I really don't want it used on anything. Anytime I write repair specifications, which I do write, I have some engineering firms that pay me to write their repair specifications. It never includes elastomeric paint whatsoever. Here's some of the standards, and it's a good place to take a snapshot of it. These are a lot of your standards for hard coat stucco, and they're always changing a little bit. So if there's a slight change, remember that. I try to keep up with it, but they're constantly changing paragraph numbers and so forth. So in the IRC, you can see your flashing details. Also the 703.7, your exterior plaster. You can go on down the line to the lath. Again, we have some additional plaster documents in the IRC, your weep screed, in which it spells out a 3.5-inch flashing detail, your water resistant barriers, the application of stucco, and the curing. The curing is another real problem. These guys do not allow the stucco to cure properly. They just start plastering it on one coat after another. It creates a lot of problems. I've got a house now that it's taken forever to figure out what went wrong. This particular builder uses elastomeric paint. All the paint is messed up. Got Sherwin-Williams involved. And finally, what it boiled down to is the stucco was not cured before the elastomeric paint went on. And it's caused all kinds of issues with the paint and blotching, and the paint's literally changing colors. And it's because the stucco was not cured. Another house that we are tearing apart. And then we get into the ASTM standards. It's critical. The ASTM, when you get into section 703 of the code for the stucco, it will tell you specifically that it also must comply with the ASTM C926 and ASTM C1063. And that is critical. That's where all your real specifics are at. If you don't own a copy of it, buy it. I can tell you it changes about every quarter. And once you buy it one time, they will email you a couple of times a year to buy a new chapter all the time. Unless it's significant changes, I do not buy them 3-4 times a year. They also have a program. I did it with Jim and some others where you can, for $10 more, you can buy it in triplicate. So get together with a few people and buy some of these standards in triplicate. It's about $75, $80 a chapter in triplicate, and if you split that 3 ways, it's not too expensive to start acquiring some of these ASTM standards that you need for this stuff. Again, the reason this is important, everyone always says, well, we're not doing a code inspection. Well, I got news for you. That's exactly what you're doing. When a seller wants to go to track, or a seller wants to file suit on you, which is happening right now to an inspector that might even be in this room, when that happens, you need something to hang your hat on. Not that Jeff Adams just said it was wrong. Jeff Adams is a nobody. I always tell people when they call me yelling and screaming, sellers or Trek or anybody else, that I said something. I said, I never said that. I didn't tell you that at all. The ASTM standards told you that, or the IRC told you that. I didn't. Jeff Adams didn't tell you anything other than point you in the direction of where that information is at. I'm just a parrot. I just squawk back what I learned. It goes in a little bit with the flashing. I think they've changed this chapter number again. I have to look and see, but it's going to get you right there. And it goes into the approved corrosion resistant flashings and so forth. This is quite interesting. That the number 2 under that is that if you notice, is it intersections of chimneys or other masonry construction with frame or stucco walls. So again, when they say, oh, the IRC does not say you have to flash that stuff. Yeah, it really does. Especially when you start getting into these where they're doing a half wall of some type of masonry veneer and then stucco up above. Nobody is flashing those. And that's kind of covered not only in the IRC, but it's also covered in the ASTM requiring that. The ASTM goes into a lot more detail. The exterior plaster, the installation of exterior plaster shall be in compliance. This is where it's telling you ASTM C926, ASTM C1063. There used to be another one in there that they moved it out of there. It's still in the code, but it's in a different section. I want to say it was ASTM C923 or something like that. That one you don't really need to worry about. That one gets into the galvanizing or the zinc coatings of your trim accessories. That's something you would never know if it was done properly. That all has to be tested at a lab. So I think that's kind of why they removed it out of section 703.7 of the code now. We're going to kind of go through some of this fairly rapidly, and then I'll answer some questions. And then we also have a ton of slides. You will still see this, and you can use chicken wire, but most all chicken wire you're going to see today will not comply with the standards because it's not thick enough. There's going to be some pictures coming up where they use chicken wire. The guy had me go out to Alpine, Texas, take a look at this, and from 100 yards away, I told him, I said, you can't save this. I don't condone breaking the law, but the only thing that's going to fix this house is gasoline in a match. You can't save it. They actually did a story on it with the Dallas Morning News or one of the papers up there, because it was just so bad. 3-year-old house, and was done with chicken wire, and the plaster was just literally falling off. But you can still use a certain type of chicken wire, but it's very difficult that you're going to find the right chicken wire that's going to comply with the ASTM standards. Plaster shall be not less than 3 coats were applied over metal or wire. You can use 2 coats when it's over certain aspects. So there is a little bit of caveat. There is a product out there called a Western 1 coat. It's a manufactured product. And I know manufacturers can supersede the code, but there's really nothing about that really meets the code. So I write it up. There's a few builders in the San Antonio, New Braunfels area that use it. There is some issues with it, that it just doesn't comply. It's a 1 coat product, and then they just put some type of top dressing over the top of it, whether it's elastomeric, or if they use a drive it top coat, polymer top coat, then theoretically you're getting that 2 coats, and it may comply in that aspect. So you have to kind of watch out. But it's a company that we're out of El Paso, and you can find that out there on job sites from time to time. It's one of the things that's also very important to remember is, our biggest part of our problem is our workforce has learned how to put these products on over Adobe or over cinder block. And of course, ideally, none of that really meets the code the way it's written or the ASTM standards, but it's a totally different substrate and works just fine. Where we end up with a problem is when we put all this stuff over insulated walls with wood framing and what have you. It just creates a gigantic sponge that holds that water in there, and it's got to be able to drain. No matter what we put on, a house got to drain, but stucco just tends to hold that moisture horribly. The weep screed, the head flashing and so forth are probably the biggest things. I see inspection reports all the time, or I get calls where people are saying, oh man, there's a lot of cracks in this house. Well, okay, it's going to crack. I mean, ideally we don't want it to crack everywhere, but it's going to crack. The biggest issue is no matter what, even if we put all of the right expansion joints, a true 2-piece expansion joint everywhere that we should, we're still going to get some cracking in the concrete. It's going to. The biggest issue is we've got to get the water out of the wall. It's got to drain down to the weather resistant barrier and be able to kick out of that weep screed. Another big issue is quite often they'll bring the stucco all the way down to the roof. We have a capillary action. Again, we've got to maintain our distances off of hardscapes and so forth. And the weep screed is one of the single biggest items that needs to be done right to kick that water out of the wall. A casing bead is not a weep screed. Those holes that are in a casing bead is not to let water out. The holes in a weep screed are really not to let the water out. That's to create a stalactite and lock it in. That 45-degree angle is a drip edge, just like on your roof, and that's where the water comes out from. Whenever you do a stucco inspection, you're going to find that, especially if they use elastomeric, they covered that edge of the weep screed with their paint, and they've sealed that drip edge off. And just about every house needs to take a razor knife and go all the way around the bottom just to break that loose. Same thing with the window flashings. They will seal those window flashings with their top coat or their elastomeric paint. You got to take a knife and cut that loose, because otherwise you're going to trap water behind those head flashings. You're going to want to try to trap it behind the weep screed. Another big issue with the weep screed that you see is these guys will shoot it with a staple gun. I can get by with staples, but not below the holes. That's pre-punched, and those holes are to be nailed into the toe plate to give you that 2-inch overhang over the foundation to help water from being wind-driven rain from forcing it up underneath that weep screed and what have you. So it's very important, and you're going to see that even though a house has weep screeds, you're going to see why they leak all the time, because they never put them on right. They shoot them down in the bottom with a staple gun, add a bunch of holes. They don't put them behind the moisture barrier properly, and then they don't overhang. You can stick your fingers underneath there, and there's only a 1/2-inch overhang. So when you get a hard wind-driven rain, it's forcing the water under the weep screed in between the foundation and the toe plate. And so it's always important to have a mirror. I lay on the ground, look up underneath there, hang my phone underneath there, find some place to look at that and make sure that weep screed's on properly. And you're going to see what I'm talking about here in a little bit. The water resistant barrier, this stucco is the only product that does require 2 moisture barriers. again, vapor permeable. There's a reason why the 2 barriers, one's to help prevent the stucco from sticking, and trying to create a better drainage plane. Doesn't necessarily work because they don't always put it on properly. So typically what you're going to see is either a zip panel or a Tyvek that goes on there, and then a black lath paper. I mean, that tends to be normally what they do with that. But you can use 2 layers of felt paper. There are other ways to do it, but typically around here, and I've gone everywhere from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, over in the Houston area, all the way out over by El Paso. So I've been out all across the state of Texas and other states, and that's typically how they're going to do that. With those are the 2 main products. There is a huge difference between these moisture barriers. When you start looking at house wrap and you see all the bad information about house wrap, it's all almost true with the exception of Tyvek. Tyvek is a different animal. A lot of these other products are just like a woven feed sack, and you can see where the success of some of those products are going to be very, very minimal. The application, each coat shall be kept in a moist condition for at least 48 hours. I guarantee you've never seen anybody out there with a garden hose misting that down for 48 hours, keeping it in a moist application. I've never seen it, and I've done thousands of inspections. Maybe some of y'all have, but it's typically not done. No one's going out there with a garden hose and misting the house to keep it in a moist condition. Again, more reasons why you're seeing so much cracking and different things like that. If you retard that, especially during the summer, and retard that drying process, you're going to get a lot less cracking. Curing the finish coat for 2-coat cement plaster shall not be applied sooner than 7 days after the application coat. For 3-coat, you can see all that. There is a waiting time period. They are typically not doing that. They usually roll up and go, do 1 coat one day, and they're back out there the next day, coming along with guys coming back behind them doing the next coat and so forth. And a lot of times they can have everything done from start to finish, including the elastomeric paint they want on there, in a week or less. And you can see that that's not going to comply, and it creates issues, traps moisture in the walls and so forth. This is where it starts getting into the good information, the ASTM standards. There's a lot to this, and this is one of the most critical things, and I use this all the time in court, but it's section A2.1.2. That requires the flashings, but not only that, it requires a contract. Okay, there has to be a specifier, an engineer, architect. I write specifications. It doesn't say who has to do it. So I do specifically write them, but there's got to be a contract in there with these sections, and it goes into detail in a couple of areas, and you can see that nobody has a specifier. It is really, really unusual. I've got one builder now that I've gone to court against a few times that now has hired me, and I've helped write some of their specifications, and they're making a lot of changes. And so I got to appreciate a company that realizes, hey, we're doing something wrong. We're going to make changes. So I really like this company, and I actually refer them as a builder, because they will come make the repairs. If you notice, aluminum is not allowed to be used. They do make, like I said, a vinyl or a plastic head flashing that can be used. Ideally, the best thing is just traditional metal head flashings. Okay. Notice the next paragraph down is X1.1.6, and this is listed in a couple areas, but again, there's to be contract drawings, and there should be a contract in place. Okay, and by that, there's specifications written, and those specifications then go to the builder and the stucco guy, and they sign a contract, and this is how this is to be put on. That never, ever happens. That is always my good trump card that I always use, so to speak. Get it? Trump card. I use that so that when they want to argue with me and say, oh, no, we do it this way, or, we have a different system, I said, hey, not a problem. Just give me your stucco contract and let me review it. And 100% of the time, and I'm sitting on an email right now that I got to respond to that came in late last night, where the builder wants to argue, but then when you tell them, hey, send over your stucco contract, they go, do what? Your stucco contract. You're required to have a stucco contract. Where's your contract? So that's always a good one when they do want to argue. This is the only material out there. When you go to the code, there's nothing else that says that you have to have a contract in place. You want to put up James Hardy, put up James Hardy. They got a manual for it. But when it comes to stucco, it is required to have written specifications with a contract and drawings, as you can see, on how this stuff's supposed to be installed with the expansion joints, flashings, and what have you. Okay. A lot of that, and you'll hear this is when you start looking at flashings, expansion joints, control joints, whatever, weave screeds, they refer to them, and you'll see this is stucco trim accessories. I don't know that I like that word. Accessory makes it sound like it may not be required when it is, but that's something you see. So when you see stucco trim accessories, that's what it's referring to, is all of those things. The ASTM standards do not specifically say that you have to have a expansion joint at every penetration. It talks about it, but it doesn't say it at every penetration. But there is also a technical bulletin. I did not include it with this, but there's a technical bulletin that basically says that the engineered bulletin says any penetration. So that can be doors, windows, gable vents, what have you. Under the ASTM-C 926, it goes into detail of the lath, the furring to receive the interior and exterior Portland cement plaster. 7.3.4, separation shall be provided where plaster abuts dissimilar construction materials. So just about every single person, that would be your bond breaks, control joints, what have you, just about every single person installing stucco, which is butt the stucco directly up to the windows, the door frames, it should have a bond break in there with a casing bead that leaves a gap that you put a backer rod in and seal. And that helps further allow expansion and contraction of dissimilar materials. It creates, you'll hear this wording sometimes, an embedded caulk joint. I use that wording specifically in my report, the embedded caulk joint. You cannot just take and butter concrete stucco up to a vinyl or aluminum window. Just does not work. Bad idea. It needs to have that bond break again at any dissimilar material. So that would include your garage door, wood frames, what have you. That all should have those casing beads creating a bond break. I stole these just because it's a name brand system that's out there that I've talked with. They have great drawings, so I've kind of taken their photos for use, which they don't have a problem with because they gets promoted. But they've got some good details showing you. This one specifically has a drainage mat in there, rain screen. There's different comments. There's talk that may become required in the code to have a drainage mat installed in the stucco. This is their specific product and detail of how this product is to be installed, and it breaks it down and gives you a really good detail of it, breaking down your sheathing, your moisture barrier, drain mats, and different layers of stucco and what have you. Again, same thing, using this, but it's showing you your control joints, expansion joints, that type of stuff. Again, drain mats, they're using the fiberglass reinforcing type of material on there to help control the cracking in the top surface. Synergy is the name of the company, and they have some really good details. So it's you can find them online. They're good details to use in inspection reports. This here is breaking down, showing you the difference in between how the previous was your control joint, which is a one piece, kind of M-shaped. This is a two piece, and there's several different ways you can make a two piece expansion joint. You're going to get a lot more thermal expansion and contraction by the two piece, obviously, than you will the one piece. This is just showing you the difference in between the two joints. Again, showing you your bond break, showing you how they're creating it. You have your backer rod in there using your casing bead. That's allowing these products to move at different amounts between the dissimilar materials, and it's very important to have those to help. You can start to get some distortion with your vinyl windows from the stucco and so forth. So again, and you won't find this anywhere. I mean, out of the thousands of homes, I've yet to ever see a house done 100% properly That's not true. I've got a builder that will hire me sometimes to go sit in the lawn chair and watch the stucco guys and yell at them when they do something wrong. So that guy does a pretty good job. But the second I leave, they go back to business as usual. But they do a pretty good job. But pretty much everything you're going to see is going to be lacking. So when we talked about stucco being a liability, it is and it isn't. If you just report all of these missing details, the missing weep screed, the missing bond breaks, the missing head flashings, all of that stuff, you really don't have any liability. Some guys will just write it in a paragraph and say it was missing all the stuff. I like to break it down and list missing bond breaks. No contract was on site for our review. Missing head flashings at doors and windows and so forth. And I put a bullet point and do each one. And when you do that, there's no liability in inspecting stucco when you list each and everything that is missing. Again, we're getting into some of the flashing details and so forth on how to do this. It's very critical. Theirs is, you can see they're leaving a gap in here, double flashed with a backer rod. It's critical that these materials do not get sealed along this edge, which always happens. No big deal, just need to take a pocket knife and just make a score cut in there, but need to get that cleaned out, whether it's a polymer top coat or whatever. And occasionally you'll find where a builder, the painter caulks it shut, and that's just an issue. You got to peel that caulk out of there. But this particular one is showing you how they're doing a double flashing detail on here. Not a bad way to do it. And again, that's why I kind of plagiarize their photos. This one here is showing you how they're doing the flashing down below at the window. I don't know that I necessarily like this detail. The code requires that your sill flashings terminate between the layers of moisture barrier. It specifically spells that out. But then when you start looking at some of these products that are out there, their install tells you not to do that. I rather see the sill flashings underneath this window come over the top of our lath paper, okay, and keep that water on the surface as much as possible and not put it between the lath paper and say the Tyvek or what have you. Certain products, that's exactly how it's going to work. When you do zip, the zip system, it does, there is no other way to do it unless you create some type of bib or apron underneath the window. And there's a stucco installer that does do that, adds a little extra bib of moisture barrier underneath the window assembly so that they can keep as much of that moisture up on top as humanly possible. Okay. This here is basically a color detail of how a decorative band is supposed to be done. Under ASTM C926, it's going to show you this detail here. So I like this. When they use the casing beads and they nail them through the window flashing details and everything, you're just asking for leaks. I have a court case right now where the architect that's the expert on the other side, he wrote up that the details were wrong and they're 100% right. They're done just like this. And my response was, not only we cut open the house, not only is it right, but they're also sloped. Well, he responded back and he said, well, that slope is only so birds do not land on the stucco. I had a very hard time responding to that. I basically just said that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of, because we slope the driveway and yet birds land on it. We slope the sidewalks and birds land on it. And guess what? That roof is sloped to shed water, and I'll be damned if birds don't land on that thing as well. That was basically my response back for the court, but that was the dumbest thing. But it is required to be sloped. The traditional casing beads that they put above and below with a little 1/2-inch fur out, those are a horrible idea. They're just punching more holes through any flashing details, whether they're sill or head flashings, and you're just asking for more leaks. Plus they're never sloped because of the way those casing beads are, and they don't meet the criteria, the ASTM C926 standard, which this does specifically. Again, just some additional details of how you're going to end the framing. Here they're calling for a sealant up at the top where it terminates at the soffit. There is a casing bead in there. Again, this particular one's not showing the backer rod, but You do want to maintain at least 1/4 of an inch between those casing beads and dissimilar materials. I've seen some engineers write it up as a closer to 1/2 inch, which is fine again, and seal them, and it just allows for that expansion and contraction. A 1/4 inch is about as small of a gap that should be left in there minimum. Showing you the detail of the weep screed. This weep screed detail is horrible. It's got some holes way down low, but if you notice, they're bringing these moisture barriers all the way down to the bottom. This 45-degree angle that comes out and drip, this is your drip line. This is where the water will run out and drip off of, not through the holes. Not all of these have holes in there. This is to create a drip edge specifically, okay? Their particular product is showing a minimum of a 1-inch overhang. A lot of the other products that you're going to typically find that we use around here in Texas are going to give you somewhere between 1.5 inches and 2 inch overhang when you put the nail holes into the toe plate like it's supposed to be. Okay. Again, this is a foundation weave screed. It has a turn down. You do not have to use that. You can use just an angled weave screed as well. But you do have to make sure you have the overhang. 1 inch is a minimum that I want to see. You guys that are along in coastal areas, you really want a 2-inch overhang. 1 inch is not going to be enough in a coastal area. When you get a wind-driven rain, it is going to force water up and into here and cause damage. You get that 2-inch overhang, and it's going to really struggle to try to push that water up that high. 140-mile-an-hour wind will damn sure do it, but that's not the norm. Here is a different detail of the weave screed, showing you the clearance to the earth and so forth. There's your nail holes, showing you your moisture barrier. This detail came out back when it was only required to have 1 layer, so it does not show the second layer of weather-resistant barrier on here. It's showing the old single layer, but you can see where your nail line is going into the toe plate and what have you. That picture's in here twice. We'll skip that. I don't know why that's in there. Some of your details, your flashing details and sealant. This here is always messed up with improper flashing details. Okay. They'll use the lick and stick tapes. They're all crinkled up. You can't stop the water with the way most of these trades are flashing these details. I like the diaphragm boots that go on there. It's like a stretched diaphragm that'll slide over this, and you tape 3 sides of it. You don't have to use that, but I try to get the builders to use them that I work with. But we've got to have all of this flash between our moisture barrier and our penetrations, and then obviously sealed around our penetrations as well. This is a roof detail on a project worked on. Engineer had drawn this. If you notice there, he's using a foundation weave screed, and that's fine. But again, you will find that they bring the stucco down too low to the roof, so that you don't have a proper capillary break where it's going to want to suck water up into there. Again, we're looking for about 2 inches off the roof. Anything with stucco is basically 2 inches. And but most of the time they're using just a casing bead here, which does not have a 3.5-inch flashing detail. It's just an improper termination. Anytime we have a termination, we need that 3.5-inch flashing detail. Okay, you have your base flashing here for your roof and all of that. But then we have this here, and your holes are going to be up in the top here, so you're not damaging it. When they bring this weep screed, the few builders that do it, they bring the thing all the way down to the ground. Guess what? We're putting holes in here. So why even have I've got one builder uses a 6-inch flashing. Well, who cares if you use a 6-inch flashing? If you poke a hole in the bottom 2 inches, you're only getting credit for 2 inches of flashing. So it's important to maintain that 2 inches off of the decking material. This is another way of doing it. Several of them are doing this. This works just fine, but I'll be damned if half the time they don't caulk this. I wish this had a little bit of a slope on it. This is bent at a 90 degree. I've got several builders do it. There's holes up at the top. This will allow the water to weep out of here and work just fine. When they do this, there is a little bit of an issue with this drawing, not really showing the moisture barrier coming down over the, oh yeah, it is, there's a vapor. Okay, there it is. So it is coming up over the top. Again, though, whenever they do this, I had one here recently that only had a 2-inch flange here. This has to have a 3.5-inch flashing detail to meet the code criteria. Okay. This here is in the code check, and I love this. So this is your soffits. We don't use that much soffits. Where this really comes into play is box windows, or up on a porch, we have a wooden beam in here, and they would just wrap this with stucco. And I can't tell you how many of these wooden beams are rotted out because there's no drainage plane. It traps moisture in there. I love this detail. I use this in every single report just about that I do, that has stucco in it. Some of the builders, I've gotten them away from even putting stucco into the box windows. We just use a piece of fiber cement siding here. So this is stucco. You're not going to see the fiber cement siding gets painted. And again, we have a drainage plane to get this water out of here and get it to leak out. And I may have some pictures of some box windows that we've come back and redone in here. I can't remember if I've added that failed on a house that's just a year old. This detail here, from Fortifiber, I like this. So this contradicts what the code says. So this here is showing you how your sill flashings are going to terminate up underneath that. That lath paper is going to terminate up underneath those sill flashings. Okay, so this contradicts the code. I want to keep the water up on top of 2 layers of moisture barrier. I don't want it to go in between the moisture barrier unless I absolutely have to. The more water we can keep up on the surface of the stucco, the better off we are. The more water we can keep up on the top layer of the moisture barrier here, the better we are. The other way is the sill flashings are in there, and then we just put the lath paper over the top. Any moisture gets in here, we're forcing it between the 2 layers of moisture barrier and just have a higher chance of leakage. Here's a good detail of the flashing. This, I don't remember who drew this up. I, again, plagiarized this a long time ago, made some changes to it. I forget, I took something out of here, but I forget what it was. But again, it's showing you a good detail of how your flashings are going to terminate up on top of here. Okay, this one they're drawing it with a casing bead and they're putting a backer rod in here, and it's really way over flashed. But again, it works very, very well to keep that water up on top here and prevent it from having to go all the way down here and finding these screw holes and everything else and getting in through there over time. So we're keeping that water up there. Mark and I just worked on a project, Mark Everwine and I, where we had the builder bring the flashings down here. You know, a lot of them, the builder says, oh, if I do that, it's going to look horrible, because he doesn't want to do it. So we said, hey, not a problem. We just pop this cap off. We bring the flashing down here, leave a weep hole. Now you don't see it. And any water comes down, it's going to come out through the weep holes up underneath your ledger. So, whenever they tell you that, say, hey, not a problem, just bring the flashing down here. And in that case, we didn't even use metal. We just used the plastic reinforced brick flash that came down through here, just made a curve, and it just kicks the water right out of the wall. A little bit of stuff. This is, when I write a repair protocol, I like DuPont products. I like the commercial wrap, or what they have is their stucco wrap. It's got a crinkled drainage plane in it. I like their products. They a lot of science has gone into them. The perm rating is really good on these things to prevent water from getting in. The product themselves work well. The installers, not so much. That's where we can have the greatest thing in the whole world, but it's still, until we get smarter and more conscientious installers, it poses some problems. But I do like the Tyvek products for specs. But I also don't have a problem with Zip. I deal with Zip all the time. I like Zip as well. But most of the things we're going to do already has a sheathing on it. We're not going to go back and peel all the sheathing off. We're just going to replace the rotted areas, and then I'm going to go back in with Tyvek rather than reskinning the whole house. Giving you a little bit of detail on your stucco or stone on there. This is the Tyvek rain screen. They've got a Tyvek rain screen that's out there on the market. Again, creating drainage planes to get the water out of a wall. Several people have it. Funny story, here in San Antonio, we're way behind the times. I worked on the Stinson Airport control tower. We had stucco around that control tower, 140 foot in the air. And so just taking a pounding. Well, the engineer drew a drainage screen in there, like a Brillo pad material, a neat product. We couldn't find anyone in San Antonio. As big as San Antonio is, nobody knew what it was. Nobody's ever used it. We had to bring in a stucco applicator from Houston, put them up in a hotel, and pay triple the cost just to find someone that could apply this a few years ago, but that could apply this rain screen product that was specified by the engineer. I was just dumbfounded that we didn't have anybody that couldn't roll Brillo pad around something and apply it. But again, that's what you deal with your workforces. The breakdown, most of the time, most products are going to work reasonably well with a few exceptions, but trying to find someone that can even put them on is a real problem. The competitor, Zip, I don't know, depending on where you're at, we're using a ton of Zip around here now. It's their weather resistant barrier. It's their wind bracing, the whole 9 yards, good product. Lot of application of the lick and stick tapes that you have to really watch. The guys don't want to roll them on, they crinkle them up, so have to really watch those. No different with Tyvek with the seams and so forth being an issue. Both products, or I don't want to say both products, but any product out there, the real issue that you run into is Tyvek wants a 2-inch overlap. They'll accept, I think, a 1-inch overlap, but they'll leave the Tyvek sticking down here, and then they turn around and cut it off flush all the way around. So now we don't have an overhang. Same thing happens here with the Zip. Now with the Zip product, your weep screen's going to go on over here. It's going to be flashed, and so you're going to get your overhang, but you have to really watch it, and they have to flash that right. It's critical to flash that right. If we have a little crinkle in there, the water's going to run down the wall, find that crinkle, and make it up underneath the toe plate. So it's something that you have to really watch, these moisture barriers and how they overhang. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of issues with water tracking up underneath that wall. It'll start to swell products. As it does, you're going to get all that crackling along the bottom, all that cracking occurs and what have you. This is just a complete, for any of the military people, FUBAR, this particular builder, I'm not going to tell you their name, but they've got 300 to 400 lawsuits coming their way right now over their stucco. Their own expert out of Dallas said, come on guys, for $200 to $300, I could show you how to prevent all this from happening. The CEO of the company says, I build 7,000 houses a year. Like, meaning, are you crazy? I'm not doing that. We'll just roll the dice. So hopefully we can bankrupt them in court because they deserve to be bankrupted. You'll see these plumbers, electricians, they cut a hole in the weep screed. We have moisture barriers not overhanging the weep screed properly, where you've got fasteners not being covered so that water can track back up underneath there. This particular weep screed is not overhanging far enough. They shot it with staples if you blow it up. So this thing is only overhanging about a 1/2 inch. This, along with a lot of the builders, Meritage is one, Bella Vista, a lot of them, they are not flashing. I don't care what the product is, they are not flashing this through the moisture barrier. They're only coming in and caulking on the backside to the sheathing, which is just never going to work. The sheathing is going to swell up. I don't care if it's hardy siding, I don't care what the product is, will not work. And then of course we don't have any type of sleeve. We're going to have a masonry penetration. It's got to be sleeved, but there is no flashing at this penetration whatsoever. And so those are all, this is why, even though you reach up underneath there and you got a weep screen, you go, oh good, it's got a weep screen. It doesn't matter, it's not going to work. It's got holes in it, it's unflashed. You're going to have leakage. It may take a little bit longer, but you're going to have leakage. This is a big issue. These columns all over the place. And the same thing happens too with brick and stone over time. There's no pedestal here. This framing, even though it's pressure treated, the sheathing's not, but the framing's pressure treated. Pressure treated wood does not last that long when it gets wet all the time. There's no raised pedestal here. So we're bringing the stucco down. We're not maintaining the 2 inches. Even if it was brick or stone, we still got the problem. There'd be brick flashing there. The water gets up underneath there. It stays damp for a long period of time. I can't tell you how many houses I've done where the columns are collapsing because they're rotted out at the base. But of course, the builder says, oh, that's pressure treated. That pressure treated wood, when it stays wet like that, won't last 6 months to a year before it starts getting soft. It should have a raised pedestal on here. A couple of builders I'm working with, it's too hard for their concrete guys to get that framed out and hit the pedestals right. So they're coming back, drilling in, epoxying rebar, dowel pins, pouring a 4-inch high pedestal that's in here. And then we're bringing that column down, and we can put our weep screed on, and we're preventing the water from getting in there. So we're adding the pedestal blocking after the fact. There is another way to come back and fix it once it's too late. There's an engineer named Dean from MLaw, who I'm not a big fan of, but I sure like Dean. Dean is a good guy, really sharp, and he's got a method where you take a piece of metal flashing, comes down over, and then there's a reglet cut all the way around these columns on, and then you put a bead of NP1 in that groove and behind that groove, and when you put that down and secure it, that's completely sealed and no water can get up underneath there. And of course, it's open on this side to drain out. A real good way. We're using his method right now on a house. You're going to see some of the pictures here that's just completely rotted out, almost collapsed after 8 years. And that was his solution for it. And I agreed, and I like it, and I've plagiarized it. Again, this is why we're going to fail. We shot holes in there that's not covered. The moisture barrier is too short. But on top of that, where's the Tyvek? The Tyvek is behind your weep screed here, okay? Your window flashings, your sill or your pan flashings are behind this. So we are literally forcing water down here, and it's going up underneath the toe plate in this house, okay? Missing bond breaks. They didn't cut out. Whenever you add your expansion joints or your control joints, the lath cannot be continuous behind them. You've got to cut that out so that we have basically 3 pieces, 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, and it could be a 4-piece detail if it is a true expansion joint. Again, this is going to do nothing but fail. I like those sill flashings. I want the guys that I work with, you can see the glue line. I tell them pop the glue loose. I want the sill flashings over the top of this. We want to keep as much water on top of the surfaces of these moisture barriers as possible to alleviate it. I know that's not what the code says, but in my opinion, the engineer came up with that is completely wrong with the code. Either way is acceptable. I've got some builders that just refuse. They're going to follow the code. Hey, not a problem. But if I'm writing the repair specs, I want it up on top. Any repair specs I write, you will not put the sill flashings between the layers of moisture barrier. They say it's because the stucco can stick to it, but that crinkled up plastic sill flashings that we use around here from FortiFlash, it's not going to stick to it. It's not going to cause any problems whatsoever with it. Okay. Again, there's a company up in Austin that will do it like this, but they actually put an apron of felt paper underneath there. And so it works really well. And I like that idea too. And that's another solution if you want to terminate the sill flashings between there. Again, you can see the sheathing, you can see the Tyvek. They're not flashing this. This ain't going to be flashed. They are going to strictly caulk this. Same builder again, lots and lots of lawsuits. Their stucco's leaking everywhere, all across the country. You can't stop the leakage from this. And of course, doing your inspection, you don't see this. These are the hidden liabilities. And so you obviously want some disclaimers in there on a stucco house. But there is a ton of these houses being done. This is not the same house. These are houses that the builder testified that they changed their process and they no longer do this. I left the mediation. I told the attorney, I'll call you shortly. I went straight over to another neighborhood that builder was building in, and these are the photos. And I said, well, evidently they must be talking about change because they haven't changed yet. They're still doing the exact same thing. And there's lots of these builders doing this. There's no way you're going to stop the water with this with just caulk, especially when there's a window or other feature up above here, 2 stories, cracks, anything like that's going to get in there. It's going to get to this. It's going to start swelling that sheathing. It's going to cause all kinds of cracking. Again, you can see here, I mean, just everything about this, we're short with our lath paper. Our weep screed is on top of our moisture barrier that's behind there. We've shot it full of holes. This is not a true weep screed. It's just a casing bead. You can't stop the water with anything like this. The water's going to get in behind here. You don't have a 3.5-inch flashing detail. I mean, you still see this all the time. This is just not going to work. This is going to do nothing but leak. Water's going to get underneath there. Some houses will go a year and have a problem. Some houses make it 30 years. You can't predict how or when, but it's going to create all kinds of problems. The other thing you run into doesn't happen very often down here. It does up in the Dallas area. or other areas of the country, is these types of details will ice dam. They'll hold water in the bottom of that. They'll ice dam, and you'll see these houses, down in my area about once every 10 years, we had a major freeze and rain here. It will ice dam up in here, and it will just crackle all along the bottom edge of the stucco. That's one of the things that causes that. That or the sheathings expanding and pushing out, and it's crackling here. But this is just, these little details typically are about 3/4 high, 3/4 wide with a 3/8 inch turn up. Again, some of the same problems. In this case, the weep screen, as you look down here, is on top of both layers of moisture barrier. Not going to work. Missing expansion joints, missing bond breaks, sill flashings back behind there. So we're going to completely miss this. And because they cut the moisture barrier off short, whether this is a zip, whether this is Tyvek, the water is going underneath the toe plate, and it's 100% going to leak up underneath there. I really want that moisture barrier longer, but that's everything about this just going to fail again. Water's going underneath there. This house will rot out in a few years' time.
Jim says, how many stucco applications actually use a drainage mat?
I have, here in my area, the only one I've ever seen it on has been the FAA control tower. That was all dictated by the feds, the state, and everything. Down here, they are not using it. Other parts, they are using it some over in the Houston area, but if you find it's mostly going to be on commercial, because builders want to save a few bucks. They don't want to have to spend a few more dollars. So the answer is going to be very minimal.
All right. Another question Gary Baldridge asked, is the contract good for multiple homes?
You know what? It really could be. If you have plan A, plan B, plan C, that you're building, there's no reason why it would not be. I mean, it would work just fine, because it's going to stipulate all these different bond breaks, head flashings, what have you.
Okay. Another one says, does lick and stick require bond breaks left and right of windows?
Lick and stick require bond breaks left and right. Oh, the
stone
culture. Yeah, the lick and stick stone brick. Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, it's stucco. The application for that is the same. The manufacturer might supersede something based on the product that you're using, but those lick and stick details are no more than stucco.
Okay. Someone's asking if you share your stucco comments from your reports.
Oh, I don't have a problem. If you send me an email, I don't have a problem. I'll have to put it together, because like I said, I don't have a blanket. I list each individual item in my report. I don't write a paragraph to include 6 different comments. So I'd have to put all that together, but yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. How do you handle when the weep screed is above the bottom of the seal plate so that the seal plate is visible?
I see that all the time. It's going to leak. I tell my client it's going to leak, and it will. 100% of the time it will leak. They either listen to you or they don't, but that's no different than telling them that they've got something wrong with the electrical. Some people listen and some don't. Your job is to report it. What they do with it is up to them. It's that old adage, you can lead that horse to water, but you can't beat him to death and make him drink it.
All right, good comments. Jeff, could you provide us with some suggested disclaimers? Maybe post them on the TPREA Facebook page so we can find them and copy them for our use.
I would have to put some together. Believe it or not, I don't hardly have any disclaimers for stucco, because I go through there and list every single thing. I really don't have, I'm gonna have to look. If I have a disclaimer, it's gonna be like 1. I don't have disclaimers for stucco like I do other stuff, just because of the level of inspection that I do.
All right. So let's see, how do you add flashing to an existing natural stone veneer when adding an awning over an exterior door?
How do you add flashing over a door when you're adding an awning with stone veneer? a lot of the stuff, and this is why I don't have any liability. My insurance company liked to have flipped their lid when they found out I was writing repair protocols for engineers, and threatened to drop me. But there's no real liability when you tell somebody what it's going to take to do it right, and that is remove the stone. Take the stone down and do it right. Now, is anyone going to do that? Probably not. But again, as all of y'all know, when we go out and do these inspections, we find what happens when somebody doesn't do something right. It causes these houses to rot out, filled with mold. Anything that I do repair protocol wise on anything is to disassemble it. We're going to take it apart, so that if I need to put flashing in the wall, we're going to have to remove veneer. We're not just going to come up there and butter it with caulk and stick it to it and go, man, I hope that works.
I thought caulking fixed anything, that and duct tape.
It does. Well, it's got to be Gorilla duct tape. If you use a Gorilla brand duct tape,
All right. Someone said, what do you mean by flashing a pipe penetration in a wall?
So any type of wire, pipe, anything like that. And here's a real hard one to do. And they make, and I might have it in here, I might not. They make a flashing boot for that. There's a couple companies out there that make a plastic flange with the way I explain it is a diaphragm. It's a rubber diaphragm. And so if you've got a 1-inch pipe, that rubber diaphragm is about 3/4 of an inch, and you put that on there and push it on, and it stretches over that, and then you tape 3 sides of it. And I might have those pictures in here. I made some changes here recently, but you can cut your FortiFlash or what have you, or zip tape. You can cut it, but most people are not going to do it. But you've got to flash any penetration through that moisture barrier. The outlets are the toughest ones, but they do now make a specific flashing detail for flashing the outlets for that works the same way. It's got a rubberized diaphragm that goes around that, and you tape 3 sides, leaving the bottom open to keep that water out. And that is a huge breakdown in leak issues. When you start cutting these houses open, the water's getting in through any penetration, whether it's a door, window, a hose bib, electrical outlets are notorious for leaking if they're on the, not up underneath the porch or what have you. And so that's a big problem with stucco, or any product for that matter. I mean, God, James Hardy leaks at those areas too when you start looking at it.
All right, good. Says another question, do you have actual photos of what you expect to see for correct flashing installations?
I had those drawings in there. No, I do have some like CAD drawings from engineers that we looked at some of the flashings from that one particular company. We'll have to look. I don't think I have any here. What I mostly have here is all the things that are wrong and why it's going to leak. You won't be able to see whether the flashings are done properly, with the exception of the weep screed. And I'll show you how to look for a proper weep screed that you can usually identify somewhere on the house.
Okay. Another question, is a separation required between stucco and stone materials?
Yes. Any dissimilar material has got to have a bond break to allow for thermal expansion contraction. This 3/4 inch thick stucco is going to expand and contract differently than a larger, say a 3-inch by 8-inch brick, or even a 4-inch by 8-inch piece of cut limestone. And so we've got to control that. So any dissimilar materials requires, and the ASTM requires a bond break.
Yeah, we see that a lot in this area with the stones butt up to the brick or stucco.
Right.
Just a mortar in between them.
And the stucco drains behind there. Now, normally, if it's just a small thing, it doesn't always leak. But again, you've got all those holes from brick ties, everything. Brick is designed to have the moisture drain an inch away, that 1-inch airspace. That stucco, any moisture gets in there, you're forcing that moisture all the way down the moisture barrier and trying to get out through the brick flashing at the weep holes. Just a horrible idea. It always finds a tear. It always finds one of those water pipes that's not flashed. It finds its way in,
Okay. So someone says clarification. Should a casing bead not be used where a stucco wall terminates above a roof surface?
Yes, should not be used. It requires a 3.5-inch flashing detail. It traps moisture, depending on where you're at, creates ice damming issues. So yes, a casing bead should not be used. Now they do make a casing bead with a 3.5-inch flashing detail. I guess theoretically, if you could find that, I've only ever seen it once. If you could find that, you could use that. I would not recommend it just because of the ice damming issues. It'll hold moisture in that casing bead and create ice damming.
Okay. Someone's asking if you'll change the color of your mouse pointer during the break. It seems like it's hard to see what you're pointing at.
I can try that. We can give it a shot. White doesn't work. Yeah.
When you're on break. I also want to say to everybody, this presentation will be posted on YouTube for the InterNACHI YouTube channel and on the InterNACHI's webinar list. So on the actual InterNACHI website itself. So you can go in and review this as many times you like.
Okay, so in this photo, you can see a lot of things. One, there's no bond break up here. I don't sweat that as much up here, but you know, theoretically, if you're doing the design from the ground up or what have you, this is required to have a bond break between these dissimilar materials. Bond break here, missing head flashings, a lack of expansion joints. So again, you know, expansion joints doesn't necessarily say you have to do it at every penetration, but then again, there is a technical bulletin that basically says that it should have an expansion joint at each penetration. And again, I use the word expansion joint loosely. It could be a control joint or expansion joint, but ideally we're trying to help alleviate some of the cracking. We want it to expand and contract, what have you. Now, this is what I start looking for. So here's a spot here. You can see your toe plate right here. You can see the pressure treated. You can see that they shot this full of holes way down too low. This whole assembly here is only overhanging the foundation a 1/2 inch. Okay. This here is your house wrap. This particular one, just some green plastic material. I don't know who made this or anything. So you can see that our weep screed is on wrong. So that moisture coming down in here around these corners stuff can get to the sheathing. Okay. So you know when you start looking at this that you've got a weep screed problem. Okay. This is just not going to work any long-term effect, and not to mention none of the holes are properly covered where they shot this thing full of staples. Okay, so these are things I look at these corners. I look for some place to show that yeah, it's got a weep screed, but it's installed with the fasteners too low into the weep screed. The weep screed doesn't overhang the foundation line properly, and it's not in a shingle fashion, with the weep screed being installed first and then your weather resistant barriers on top of it. Another way to do this as well, looking up through these weep holes, okay, you can find some areas, again, we're not properly overhanging here. You can't see very well from this, but actually, again, the screed is on top of the, I think this one had Tyvek if I remember, but it was on top of it. This edge here you can see is open. This is what you have to watch for. If this edge gets closed off, this is your drip edge for your weep screed. Okay, moisture will not be able to get out of there like it should. Okay, these holes are great places to find things. Again, this is in violation of so many things here, but one, you know, under 703.4, somewhere in there, you've got a wood detail projection that has to be flashed. They've used the stucco decorative bands with casing beads, and as they've done that and made this rectangular box out to receive the stucco, they've just blown more holes through the any type of flashing details around here. This one is not as big of a deal, but when they do it at windows, it's a huge issue because they're just punching holes. Even, and I've got some pictures that'll come up here in a little bit. They actually blew holes through the metal head flashing. So the builder had metal head flashing, but the stucco guy did all of the decorative bands wrong and just blew holes all through it, causing it to leak. Okay. Again, now this is up underneath the eave, so it's not as big of a deal, but it does specifically say in the ASTM standards, unlike the architect thought, this is required to slope to shed water, and in his eye is to prevent birds from landing on it. These types of details leak all the time. This is what those holes are for. Now this one went pretty extreme, but that can be broken off. But those holes in there create a stalactite that lock that stucco in. They're really not designed to allow the water out. Here is, again, your drainage plane. And you have to make sure that you've got this little crack and crevice along here. This is where water is going to drip and leak out of, okay? I actually just came across this picture here the other day on a job, and this kind of shows you how that's supposed to be locking that in. Not all weave screeds even have those holes. Some do, some don't. Here is a new house. They called me out. The client did not listen very well. They ended up going with a different expert after they dragged me into this thing. I found a little bit of water staining there. The whole front of this house is completely rotted out. The builder only wants to fix this front part. This house here is only, God, it's somewhere between 1 and 3 years old. I think this is a 1-year-old house, if I remember right. I've got so many of them going right now. I think this one is 1 year old. You can see how rotted it is in here with the destructive testing. It's a new house. It's $1 million house. Again, you can see the rot running all the way up and down these walls. This whole front of this thing supporting the roof up here is becoming structurally unsound. Okay. Again, the builder only wants to do this. As they tear this open, it's a major problem. They've torn all the moisture barrier back here. They just create another leak issue. They're just going to take some flashing tape. I see them do it all the time. They're going to put some peel and stick right here, only 3/4 of an inch wide onto the brick, and then stucco over. It's going to leak. Now, once they've torn this up to this degree, this stone has to come off of here. Okay, all the stone has to come off here so that we can get our 2 inches overlap on our moisture barrier. You can see this is all rotted into the walls, past the sheathing, into the studs. Oh, I'm sorry, here it is. Yeah, so it's a 3-year-old house. Okay, this one's 3 years old. And it's all completely rotted out and structurally unsound at the front of this house. So looking at this, you can see all of this is just completely gone. The studs are starting to rot here, holding a lot of weight. This was my indication that this was rotted and leaking. You can't see it very well in this photo. But you can see some little faint brown staining. That's how I knew this was going to be all rotted out. You start finding, I might have a better picture of it. Yeah, this is a different house. But again, you can look at this. Now, the engineer says that I can't prove that this is rotted because I didn't do destructive testing. I don't need to do destructive testing. This is 100%, stake my life on it, rotted out. They've now opened it up and it is rotted. But I mean, you can see this is all the rot and decay from the sheathing and studs, and it is washing that brown rot and decay out of there. There's whole neighborhoods like this on this. This is that one where the builders got 300 to 400 lawsuits coming their way. I only got 2. I'd like to get a few more of them, but all completely rotted out. This one's a no-brainer, very easy to see if you're doing a home inspection. They're not always that easy to see. Again, another issue, you can see all the cracking here. We did not create a drainage plane and treat this like a soffit. We wrapped the stucco, the water's gotten in here. You can see the water's leaking out here. Believe it or not, the inspector missed all this. This is one that the inspector's going to get sued on. He completely missed all this stuff. He just said it had some cracking. You can see plain as day all the water. None of the stucco was done right, and this water's wrapping around and then coming out here, running down the wall. Same thing, getting water in around windows. Okay, you can see the water stains down along here where this has been leaking along the edges of the window. This one's a doozy. You can see the staining here. Then we've got these big wood details. This is all stained and it's becoming all damaged. No flashing details. They're basically made like an old-fashioned wood type of lintel. There's nothing that prevents this water from leaking in there whatsoever. And again, you start seeing this staining. This staining is an indication you've got moisture between there. On a rare occasion, it's not. You know, there might be some algae or something from a tree, but usually when you see the staining, you can almost bet that you're going to have water damage inside the wall. Again, more water stains. You can see all the discoloration. No brainer. This is also another one that the inspector did not write up. You can see where the water's leaking out here. Around the window, there's also some water stains along this edge here where water is coming out of a crack. lot of inspectors are missing these items. Again, water stains. This was another one that was missed. This is a deck secured to the house, and you can see the water stains coming out of there. They just literally screwed this deck to the side of the house. This is the same house. You come inside. This is the deck. Inspector didn't catch any of this. Of course, this is all rotted out inside the house. The door frame's all rotted out. This door frame is just to the left of this water stain and down below. So, you know, those are the types of things, I mean, that you can see, and this is very obvious. Some of the stuff is not as obvious, and you want to get very good at it. I've got an inspector that refers me on all this stucco stuff. One of the Spurs players was selling his house, and he knew there was some issues with the stucco, and I went in there and found water stains in 13 areas that he didn't find. And he said, what the hell? And this is a good inspector. He said, I didn't find any of that. And so I got on my belly and put my flashlight in my teeth, and I slowly crawled it like I was in a war zone and just stared and stared and stared till I could see that, because it had been repainted. And finally, your eyes could start focusing on this little bit of water. And then, of course, most houses, if you look real close, they have, quote, loose carpeting. And the loose carpeting is a great way to find water stains on the tack strips. I had one where the agent said that it was not leaking. I was crazy, and I pulled the carpet back, and all the tack strips were brown. The carpet obviously had been shampooed and cleaned, because as wet as that was, or as discolored as it was, it would have had a major staining of the carpet. There's no way you couldn't have seen it. This one here has been an ongoing issue. This is caulk that they put in here one time. So this is not from just a couple of leaks, and how the inspector misses, I have no idea. This one is a doozy. Took the stucco down below grade, which they do all the time. Major problem, foundation expands, contracts one way, the walls and stucco does another way. That thing was opened up around 1.5 inches there. Just a complete mess. And you can see that they'd been ongoing patching it for years. This one, I don't even know why the client even had me go inspect it. I mean, just everything you can see about this. This was a house on the west side of San Antonio that it has old masonite or Weyerhaeuser recalled siding under it. And this was their solution to stucco over it many years ago. And it was just a complete and utter disaster. The realtor was furious on this one. It was a realtor who used to use me on occasion, and I have never heard from them since this house, and they're still selling real estate. They were just furious about this. They were going to sell this house come hell or high water. Water stains everywhere inside, but literally this was all put over the top of rotted out masonite siding. This here, you can see the masonite siding here. You can see where they stopped part of this. Again, it was the inspector's fault that she didn't get the sell on the house. I don't even know what the people were thinking, to be honest with you, but it's a no-brainer here. I mean, you can see that everything about this is just completely shot. This is the same house. This here is, they cut out and put some plywood in here. I think this is already rotted, but you can see the masonite siding here. But this is what they put over the top of this house. Like I said, just completely rotted out. And the realtor was perfectly fine with trying to sell this to somebody and not wanting the information there. I actually did the inspection on this and then stopped. I told him I couldn't inspect this. I was not doing a stucco inspection on this, but I told him I couldn't even inspect it. It was, the house was just completely shot. It was a complete rehab, tear everything off, tear the sheetrock off, fix all the framing issues, mold, the whole 9 yards, and completely reconstruct the house where it was at was probably not worth more than about $25,000 at that time. This is a house that came up. I got a call. This is not quite 100 yards, but I saw this house 100 yards away. This is one that was in the Dallas Morning News. The gentleman lost this. At that time, I had been an arbitrator hearing construction defect cases in Texas, and he called me out there. This is in Alpine. This is at the base of north of Alpine, south of Fort Davis, down the base of the Davis Mountains. Beautiful piece of property. And He lost in binding arbitration. He paid $30,000 to the arbitrator. They brought in a judge from New Mexico that did it, and he lost $84,000 that the builder claimed in damages in arbitration. So he called me out there and know one about fixing the house and could I help him with the losses, because the builder was trying to go after a ranch that he had out there and trying to take the ranch with a court order. And this is the one I saw him. I said, sir, I don't condone breaking the law, but the only thing that's going to fix this house is gasoline and a match. You can see it's just completely cracked all around here. The balcony is leaking. The mold inside this house was so bad that they told him it was unhealthy to live in this house, and he was staying there for some reason. Cool looking house, but whenever they do these types of structures with the logs sticking out, what have you, you have areas where the moisture just all going to get in at all of these things. Just it's a horrible way to do something. It's going to get in there, but no flashing, no expansion joints. This one is actually done with chicken wire. You can see this is bulging because the chicken wire can't hold the weight of this. Again, no expansion joints, but no drainage plane. They'd been trying to patch these cracks and stuff the builder did, and that was his solution for the stucco. Stucco goes all down below grade. You can see moisture just getting around this, more repairs to the cracking. Up along here that had the cracks not sealed. This is inside. You can see, I'm sorry, this is it around the back. They cut it open. You can see moisture's getting to this. This picture doesn't do it justice, but the moisture is getting into here. You can see the thin chicken wire. This chicken wire cannot hold the weight of all that stucco. They actually put the stucco on very thick, and it was closer to an inch in thickness, and it could not hold it, but the water was getting in there. The header down below this is rotted out. The only thing that was preventing the house from collapsing was the door. You could not open the door up. At the back, that door was holding that, and the house had dropped about a ½ inch back there already. Again, they took this off. They had put trim over the top of this. You could see where the guy had tore it open. No flashing details. You can't stop the water here. This just had a decorative trim around here. You can't stop the water from getting in this house whatsoever. They did put a casing bead here like they were going to do it, but you can see there's no bond break there. There's a bond break, but not enough to allow expansion and contraction. There's nothing there. They when you do see them use a J channel for that, they don't leave enough room to allow for thermal expansion. This here in the picture, this is back when we used the old Sony Mavica cameras with the 3.5 inch floppy. So sorry about that, but this is the header. This is all rotted out. This here is a trim. This is a kitchen door. This header is completely rotted out about where you can see where the sheetrock is. You can see how the depth of this, the whole header is gone here, rotted. And this door is holding up over here and here because the whole thing is sinking and coming down on this house. Another one, again, you can see, this is that $1 million house. So these pictures, actually, I need to correct the order. This should have been the other. So this here is what I saw. So I knew that this was rotted out on these corners. Okay, there was 2 corners like that. And so I knew this house was completely rotted out. You'll see some clear stains like this. This here is showing you water's getting in there. This is just starting to rot, but you'll see sometimes on a house clear stains. That's water getting in there. It probably won't be water damage yet, but boy, you better report it. That water's leaking out from behind the weep screen. It's leaking out of the wall, and you're going to have problems with it. You can see it's starting to turn brown. So this is already starting to rot. And then when you open it up, it's always, not always, but almost always guaranteed to be 100 times worse than what you thought it was once you cut it open. Again, water staining on houses that you're looking for, you're going to have problems. Again, this particular house, I should have pictures of it. This is what I saw. I tried to help the people, couldn't do it. Finally had to get an attorney involved, got it done. And the builder said, okay, we'll open it up, but if it's not all damaged, you agree to pay $5,000 to $8,000 per opening to put it back, the stucco. And so the attorney called, and the attorney knows me real well. And he goes, are you sure? I said, I'm 100% sure. And I said, cut it open. And when they did, my client started crying and she said, "Did you really know it was that bad?" I said, "Sure, I did." This is the one that I described to you, that this was the only indication that the whole wall was rotted out. Literally, the house was about to collapse when we got into it. There was no water stains inside. This was the only indication that there was a stucco problem. It was rotted out. This is it. So these are the things you have to really look for. And I see people say, "Oh, there's a little bit of discoloration." Well, yeah, there's discoloration because it's rotted. Report it. Again, houses, discoloration, rotted. This one is a house next door that I'm also doing. So you can see that, again, same thing. The builder only wants to pay. These are the two different houses, but they're next door to each other. The builder only wants to pay to do the one wall on this house and not the whole house. Again, not having proper drainage planes. Now this one here, this is where they come up with doing the reglet and doing that. That weave screed comes right down to the slab. So the stucco's off there about 3/8 of an inch off the slab. But again, no pedestal, no wave. This traps water up on the porch columns and what have you. This is another house. The builder, actually, I had sued this builder, or part of suing this builder, for $1 million that we won. Well, he learned a valuable lesson, and he's getting ready to do a remodel on $1 million house. The home inspector wrote none of this up. There was no carpet in this closet. It was always left raw flooring. 1.3, 1.5 million. The builder convinced the people they got to call me out there. They only been in this house one month. They found it to be leaking. After they moved in, there was a bucket of damp red in this closet. You can see the staining. There's nothing here that prevents you from seeing it. And again, the home inspector wrote up nothing. This was not the only place. You could say, well, maybe something was blocking it. I found water staining like this inside the house in numerous places. Again, you can see the water staining coming out. You can see this picture's turned sideways. This was actually for one of my employees down at the coast, so he knew the risk, and I'll show you what it looks like. But this is the water that's leaking out of that wall. And this is what it looks like up underneath there. All the sheathing's completely rotted out, no weave screed. The water's leaking in from up above and running down, so he's gonna have to redo all that stucco on there. This particular builder is one of the same builders I keep talking about with all the lawsuits. This is what they're doing. They're doing it with fiber cement siding. They're sliding the window in, and they're trying to tape it to this and stuccoing over it, or putting the hardy trim over it with no real flashing. This is how they plan on doing this. They'll pull the lath back, but they'll just stick the window to it, and then they claim it's a self-flashing window. It's no way you can prevent that from leaking, and they only want to warranty it for 1 year. And when we start inspecting this, Jim, my good buddy Jim Heim will tell you, the home inspectors are in the insurance business. We have to insure the builder, we have to insure our client, we have to insure the seller, and there's a lot of truth in that. You don't know that they did this like this, and you do a new home inspection. It's worth driving around the neighborhood and looking to see what they're doing when you're doing these new homes. And if you do that, you'll see what's going on here. And you can't confirm it, but I make a note and said that other homes in the area are being done wrong, and you recommend destructive testing to see if this house was done wrong. Otherwise, you get bit by it somewhere down the line, and your insurance company will always throw you under the bus. And I do a lot of defense work. If they can get out something for $25,000, that's $150,000 to repair, you're going to pay, and your rates are going up, and that's just the way it is. Again, this is their solution of flashing. This particular one has zip product, no flashing. This is how they're going to try to prevent that from leaking. Same builder again. I might even tell you who it is, just so y'all know. I'll tell you who it is, because y'all need to watch this really to protect y'all. This is Meritage Homes, and this is the way they do everything from their fiber cement siding to their stucco, and they have whole neighborhoods just completely falling apart and rotting out. And you will never see this once the stucco's on, but you need to be prepared. And it's like this all over with their homes, not just in the San Antonio market. You can see here how we're bringing down the flashing. We're going to be we're missing our weave screed here. They're just going to butter this up and probably bring the flashing all the way down to the roof, more than likely here. This is not going to work. We have base flashing, or the J flashing. You can see holes here in the next layer of moisture barrier. It's not going to be keeping all that water out of there. I know everyone wants to see counter flashing, but you've got Tamlin and other companies that do not specifically require that. So they can get away with doing this, but again, you're going to have problems with this type of installation. More issues. Again, you know, this is at a garage. You can see how the framing is all done wrong here. I don't know what they're going to do. They'll probably just smear some concrete over this, try to prevent this from leaking, but none of this is really conducted right. This should have all been repaired before the weep screed went on here, where they busted it out or didn't pour it right, so that we had a proper deal. More, this is one of those same houses we mentioned before, starts with an M. This is what this house looked like when we cut it open, just from the water staining down below here. So I knew it was going to be rotted out. No staining whatsoever inside, no swelling. This was so rotted that it almost collapsed. They started cutting this out and didn't build any type of support wall on the inside. My client started screaming when the whole second story started coming down. They had to run in there and wedge 2x4s underneath it. So the stupidity runs way deeper than just the stucco on this particular deal. They've been working on this house now for 9 months. It's pretty pathetic. They've had to rebuild a big part of the house. And again, it's only a 8-year-old house. Some of the damage below the windows, but then when you open it up, you can see how damaged some of the studs were. Although this doesn't look that bad, it's a lot worse. Once you start opening it up, you can see more rot. Again, you can see the water stains, so it is evident. You can see that this has been leaking. You just have to look for it. This is the first breakdown. This is all completely rotted here. So the flashing between their James Hardy was wrong. The window flashing was wrong. The sill flashing was wrong. The weep screed was wrong. The penetrations were not flashed. So this all started leaking here, and we just added more and more water as the water came down from this house. This house now is up to about $200,000 to repair on an 8-year-old house. And keep in mind, all this upper is James Hardy, so I don't have to do it. So it's not like it's that. Yes, it's 4-side stucco, but none of the upper is. Again, more rot, just all completely rotted out in through here. The builder tried to say it wasn't that bad, and I went up on the ladder. I might have a picture of it, and I just pushed my finger through the sheathing, and I went into the second digit into the window header. You can just literally just shove your finger through it. So again, you know, you can see the stains. There's no reason why people cannot find us. The weep screed, everything was done wrong, tracking water up underneath there, and the lady was just methodical about cleaning it. You can see here's your moisture barrier. The weep screed was on over 2 layers of moisture barrier. They put it on after the fact. So there was originally Tyvek on here, you can see. And it may not have been the Tyvek brand, but I think it was. I think that's what they were using. But they put the weep screed on both. We were tracking water up underneath this OSB at the foundation line. This is a case in which I'm representing the builder. They screwed up, and I think the Tyvek rep's in here, so she'll recognize this picture. The only place we did find, their expert found that the head flashings are there. The builder did all the head flashings. The builder that I sued, or not sued, but had 4 litigation cases against them. None of them, they took care of everything, so it never went there. It's a pretty good builder. Their guy put some Tyvek tape on there, and it's not a true peel and stick flashing tape. So this all has to come off. That's the only place we found it, but lo and behold, it was one of the places that their expert opened up, and there it is. So I'm a part of the defense team on this and on what we're going to do to fix it. So they have learned about the flashing. They just few more little things to take care of. They now use Tyvek. They used to use a jip board. This one is one of the older ones with a jip board with Tyvek over it, and not a big fan of it. And I've gotten them convinced to stay away from that jip board, but it does meet code. And that is it. I could go on all day, but that should have about gave you all you need to know. There's ways to find this stuff. Slow down, look at each individual item, look for your control joints, your expansion joints, look for head flashings above every door or window. Look for your bond breaks. Take the time to look up through those holes in the weep screed, find where the weep screed's not up against her. Look to see if that weep screed's on there wrong. And I'm going to tell you, almost every single house is wrong. So even though you see weep screed, it's still wrong, and it becomes a liability back on you. Take a few minutes, and it only takes a few minutes to find all of these things. It's not like it slows you down that much whatsoever. I can do a complete stucco evaluation without doing any destructive testing and without using infrared, but just going around and walking the outside and the inside of a house. Good God, it only takes me about 30 minutes to do one of these things. So it's not like it's going to slow you down that much. On a big house, that might be there an hour, but take the time and look for the water. The water is almost always there if you take the time to find it. And I can't tell you how many of these things are turning into court cases because a home inspector didn't catch any of it, didn't take the time to look for it, didn't report it. And it's very, very obvious.
Jeff, have you ever seen a stucco home without any issues?
No, not really. One where the builder paid me, like I said, to sit in a lawn chair and yell at a stucco guy. Good builder southeast of town. And it's funny because then I referred that guy to do repairs, and he said, well, do you want us to fix it the way we normally do it or the way Jeff Adams says to do it? And I said, stop telling people that. There's a right way and a wrong way. And Jeff Adams doesn't tell you how to do it. Jeff Adams just points you to the ASTM standards, and that's it. So, I mean, stop telling people that. It's right or it's wrong. You will not really find a stucco house done right. Occasionally in the Houston market, you might. They're a little bit better over there, but still falls well short. Anything else, just horrible. Across the state of Texas is horrible. And it's a liability. With you being the one insured, it is a major liability on you as a home inspector.
Yeah, and even if you're doing commercial properties, they're still put on the same way as residential stucco is.
Yeah, all kinds of breakdowns with the penetrations and stuff. You will occasionally find drainage mats on that, the rain screens and stuff like that on commercial properties. You'll see that there before you ever will on residential. But there is talk that they're going to make it mandated to do a rain screen, which is not a bad idea. But again, you got to find someone smart enough to put it on. We can't even flash penetrations with Tyvek or Zip. I mean, how in the hell are we going to add another process and expect that's going to help?
Well, it's talking about that. Someone's typed in the question, how would you flash a horizontal gas fireplace vent penetration since you cannot use a rubber pipe boot?
You could flash it with metal flashing, make metal flashing. So just you put on the metal flashing and box around that, and then once you're away from that, then you use your peeling stick once you get several inches away from that fireplace.
Someone says, do you have a diagram of an acceptable bond break between dissimilar materials?
There was a drawing of that from that Synergy. It'll be, when you go back and look at this, you'll see the Synergy products. They did a good job of showing the bond breaks with the backer rod and stuff in there. That's why I use their stuff because of that. They've got some very, very good drawings.
Can you just kind of express what an inspector in the field would look at between break between brick and stone?
You should see some type of flashing there. You're either going to see when you've got your stucco, you should see a flashing detail come out on top of your capstone or your ledger, or it can come out underneath that ledger and have weep holes underneath it. If you don't see that, it's not flashed.
Okay.
Now, normally what they do is they just stucco the wall, and they stucco that wall. They go down below the brick or the stone, and then they just take and shove that brick or stone up to it and then caulk that line. You're just forcing water behind the wall.
Well, yeah, the question was between brick and stone. What kind of separation would you see between the brick and stone walls?
Well, on that, you're going to have that. There's ASTM standards for that. You can go to BIA.org, but again, you've got to have a expansion joint and they're 3/8 of an inch wide. And they do talk about dissimilar materials. It used to be under paragraph 107 or 108, but they keep changing it. But if you go to BIA.org, they have the ASTM standards for that.
Okay, good. It says, can you detect this water penetration behind the stucco using a IR camera?
Yes and no. That's a good topic. I get these people call all the time and say they're going to go with Billy Joe Bob because Billy Joe Bob uses a infrared on every single inspection, which anyone that knows anything or is infrared thermography certified knows that that's physically impossible. Without a delta, you're not going to get anything. So yes, I had a court case here 2 summers ago. The attorney hired me, and when we got there, he demanded that I use infrared and moisture meters. It was 105 degrees. It was in July. The drought started here 2 years ago. And we kind of got into it. I said, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to find any moisture. It hasn't rained in over 30 days. We've been 105 degrees. I will not find water. I said, let me do my job. I will find water stains and I'll find the culprit of what causes the water stains. And it almost got to the point where I started yelling at him, and he was yelling back, obviously, and I was ready to pack up my stuff and just drop this court case and leave. He finally listened to me. When I completed, he said, thank God I listened to you. I said, sir, I can break it out right now. I said, but what's going to happen is they're going to put me on the stand. They're going to ask me, did I use any specialized tools? And I'm going to have to tell them, yes, I did. And they're going to want to know what the results were. And the results were dry. So under the right circumstances, if you have a delta and if it has recently rained, yes, you'll find water all the time. But if you're relying on an infrared camera, it is a waste. You need to rely on your eyes of what you see of missing flashing details, improperly installed flashing details, because just because you don't find water today does not mean you will not find water when the weather changes and all of a sudden the front comes out of the frontal boundary comes out of the southeast from the coastal areas rather than the northwest, or vice versa. So you can have a house that only leaks once a year, and year after year doing that, it starts to rot out. So rely on this information here from the code and the ASTM, and don't just rely on infrared. If there's no flashings there, it will eventually leak. Might leak in year 1, might leak in year 30, but it will eventually leak. And you give someone the false sense of security with infrared.
Okay, I agree with that statement totally. All right, is there such a thing as a self-flashing window, or is that a myth?
Does not exist. And they've now changed that, taken it out of the code because it does not exist.
All right. So someone said, what is self-flashing? I don't know that we have enough information to answer that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a time where they wrote in the code because some engineers submitted it and said that self-flashing windows did not have to be flashed. All window manufacturers, that's actually come up in a court case. All window manufacturers all require some type of flashing detail. There is no such thing as self-flashing windows, so they had to remove that. A lot of what you see in the code is written by engineers that work for these builders. And so they are trying to simplify and dumb down things for the builders to save money. And that was one of those. That changed years ago in the code, but there is no such thing as a self-flashing window. Does not exist as far as I know, and as far as the courts know.
Yeah, we still hear that all the time from builders.
Yeah,
I've always learned that builders will tell anyone what they think they want to hear, just so they keep going.
Well, one of the things is all windows have to be AMA compliant, okay, to make it on the market now, pretty much. And so the first thing when I hear that is I go, oh, is this a AMA certified window? And when they say yes, and I say, well, flash the damn thing, because AMA 2400 chapter 10 tells you that.
All right. Someone's asking, do you have a checklist for inspecting stucco?
I do not. I still use worksheets after 30 years for what I do. And so it's in my worksheet, a lot of the stuff, but I do not. It's just, it's pretty simple. You could easily make one, I guess, but it's so simple. Stucco contract, yes or no? Head flashings, yes or no? Weep screed at the base of the foundation, yes or no? Columns up on pedestals, yes or no? Do we have a drainage plane with beam caps or soffits? Expansion joints, bond breaks. I mean, there's about 10 things, yes or no. And then I look at them to make sure that the head flashings aren't sealed at the windows, and I make sure that there's no issue with the the weep screed being put on over the Tyvek. So, there's about 12 things that you could put on a worksheet, but I've never done it.
Okay. Let's see. So weep flashing should be installed over Tyvek and shingles over the paper at the foundation.
The first thing that goes on is a weep screed. All moisture barriers go on over the top of weep screed. You do not put the weep screed in on top of the moisture barriers like you saw in those photos. And they do it all the time. They never come along, put the weep screed on, and then come back and do their Tyvek or whatever.
Okay. Another one said he saw several times balconies with stucco not terminated with a weep screed at the bottom. Is it wrong?
Pretty much, yes, sir. It's got to have a drainage plane there. It's got to have some type of flashing drainage plane. Any termination, it says, has to have a weep screed. So that would be a termination. A lot of times, they just put, and you can use a piece of flashing theoretically as long as it goes up the wall 3.5 inches, and you don't seal the stucco to it like that one engineered roof detail. That will work as long as you don't seal it. The weep screed, I think, works a little bit better because it's got that 45-degree drip edge on there.
Yeah, and we see that quite often in Houston area where they have a cantilever section of a building sticking out over a garage or something, 3 or 4 feet. All they do is wrap the stucco right around it. No weeps.
Yeah, no drainage plane. Yeah, that's a great photo that you can take right out of the code check. That one is, and it specifically tells you that. It's a great one right out of code check, showing you how to create a drainage plane.
Another comment somebody said was that a lot of times we'll see a stucco home whenever we get there for the inspection, and we'll notice that around all the bottom of the windows there's fresh paint. To me, that would be a red flag. What do you say?
Oh yeah, no. Anytime that there's repairs, I make a note of it. But I do the same thing with drywall and everything else, or brick or anything. So anytime I see repairs that are freshly done, I make a note of it on my reports. And then, I always kick everything back to the seller. Our job is to go out there and find these things. And Mr. Seller is always trying to dupe us in what he's done to this house. So, half my report says suggest consulting with the seller for details. The realtors hate it, but that's not my problem. The seller has that information. If I go out there and I see there's a bunch of toilet paper laying in the yard where they recently sewer snaked the drain line out, I write in there that, there's toilet paper in the yard and they recently sewer snaked it out. Suggest consulting with the seller for details. That seller has all that information, and we need to keep these sellers on the line and stop insuring everybody like we get caught doing. We insure everybody in this business, and we need to stop it.
All right. Someone said, since you just listed a few things for a checklist, that would be a great slide to add to your presentation.
Yeah, and this is always going. I've done this class a few times. I'm teaching it and alternate next week for the ICC. So anybody that needs ICC hours can also get some CEU credit, and I'll make some minimal changes to it here, but it's always growing, always changing as I add more to it. And theoretically, you could stretch this out into a 4-hour class if you needed to. You could add more there's more content you can do to it.
Someone saying, what recommendations do you give when you see hairline cracking in the stucco? Repair, or what's the best way?
I always make a note of repairing it, but I'm not concerned with it that much. We make way too big of a deal about cracking. Stucco is going to crack. Now, if we're getting this cracking and we're lacking expansion joints or control joints, then I'm a little more concerned because it's just going to continue to get worse.
Right now.
So that I'm more worried about getting the water out of there. Water's going to get in there. I had a deal where I was the expert on it, and one of your local boys there, DPIS, was on the other, and the engineer come out, and I told him part of the problem was the garage was not vented, the garage was too hot, and the attic was too hot. And they argued with me. They said, that's not what's causing the cracking in the stucco. I said, well, go do your inspection and come back and let me know what you find. The only other crack in the house that was not around the garage was at the master bedroom wall. That was it. There was no other cracks on this big house whatsoever. And so the engineer then says, I think he's onto something. You will always find more cracking around a garage, especially if the garage is not vented. It's hot inside the garage, it's hot outside the garage, it's hot above the garage attic. And so you're going to get much greater amounts of thermal expansion. And so garages, you're going to get a lot more cracking. Cracking is just, if all my expansion joints or control joints are there, I'm not too worried about the cracking. Just fix it occasionally and to help alleviate some of the water, but I'm not worried about as long as we got a drainage plane.
All right, Jeff, great class, man. We appreciate you putting this on for us. And I know I've learned a lot of stuff from it. And I know that you have shared a lot of information to us, and everyone on the class is sending good comments about it. But we thank you for doing the class for us, Jeff. We certainly appreciate it. And for those of you that attended, we appreciate you being on part of the class session with us. And you guys take care. We'll go ahead and end the session now. So everyone, see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.